Why don't we just start with you, Dan, and come across. So please give us your reactions of the film and also what you do and how you help the community in these ways.
Okay. Well, I run the Alternative Path to Graduation program for U32 high schools, and until this year, Montpelier High School for the last 10 years. And what we do in the program, we focus on work, employment, internships, apprenticeships. Most of the work we do with students takes place outside of the classroom. And what we hope to do ultimately is give students a comprehensive experience if they're with us for a year or two, so that when they leave high school, they have some tangible skills that provides them with some readiness once they leave high school, so they can get a job. They know how to show up, they know how to be on time, they know how to interview. In fact, I often say the program should be called the Show Up program, because when you show up, especially in this program, good things happen. And it's more of a professional relationship that we have with the kids. We sometimes tell them it's like a business relationship, that we have this project to get you graduated. So I'm going to do my stuff and you're going to do your stuff. And if I start to not show up and do my stuff, then I'm not a good business partner and you probably don't want to work with me, and vice versa. So it's not like school. It's different. I can't get them in trouble. I don't want to get them in trouble. I can't give them a detention or a D or an F. It's show up, do your best, and you will be rewarded for that. So it's a real world kind of experience for the students. And I thought the movie, you know, Tulsa, Chicago, and the Bronx, you know, how is that Vermont? But it is Vermont. Everything we saw in that film happens here. As you know, I work with pregnant teens all the time who come back to school after a couple of years or who are trying to graduate while they're pregnant. Homeless families, and I have homeless kids right now who I'm working with and try to set up with different resources so that they can succeed in school. And for me, it's inspirational what a lot of these kids go through, and there is no stereotypical kid that ends up doing an alternative program. We have this sort of stereotypical idea of what that is, but I think I work with the smartest kids in school because of what they've overcome and because of how they get through to the end. It's really impressive.
Well, I think that the film, to me, represented a lot more hopefulness than I see actually going on in Vermont. And the problems that I experience with my clients are often much more extensive than the issues that these young women face. I felt like the film with all three of the young women started off more where they felt hopeless about their futures. But they all came from very tight-knit families, very supportive, loving families with siblings who also care about them, and they stuck together. I often work with families that are very dysfunctional, where there isn't a lot of support, and where sometimes young women who are pregnant get thrown out of their house. Their families don't want anything to do with them. So in that sense, the problems that I experience with my clients and have over the past 12 years have been in some ways much more severe. In the case of Chastity, who was homeless, again, her family was very tight-knit. They were very supportive of her aspirations. And all three of them at some point received help from outside agencies like the Children's Aid Society and the success centers. I don't know if our schools have success centers, but they absolutely should, because one of the things that struck me was that the young woman who was working with, I guess it was Stephanie, or one of them no, I guess it was Chastity, who wanted to move on and go to college. And eventually she was going to Sarah Lawrence, for heaven's sake. And what an opportunity. But it was this particular woman, and I feel very strongly that we need to have these young people connect with at least one adult human being in their lives that really believes in them and shows them step by step how to move forward in their lives. And so many of the young people that I meet up with don't have that single person, and I see how important it is, and it was important in all three of these situations that all of these girls had someone who believed in them a little bit and gave them some sense of confidence so that they could aspire to having a real education. My clients often do finish school. That's a big part of the work that I do with them, getting their GEDs or diplomas, and there are many wonderful alternative programs around Washington County that could fulfill the different needs that each of these clients have, because not everybody, again, is that cookie cutter, needs to be in that cookie cutter program, even in alternative programs. Alternative programs differ vastly, and finding the right one can lead to success. And I probably a quarter of my clients are going to college. They go to community college and they're getting nursing licenses, and they do aspire to it, but they are living on the edge so often, whereas, the Darlene, who had the child very young, was living with her boyfriend's parents and had stability in a nice house. I go into houses that aren't so nice, and where people don't have anything and they don't even have food. And even though they have food stamps, they don't have enough food because food stamps aren't enough, and now they're cutting food stamps. So this is, a tragedy in this rich country of ours. What's going on is obscene to me. And my program is also a member of the food bank, so I am able to get extra food for my clients. But often, even at the food bank, I cannot get what they really need and what my program can afford. I think that those are the main differences that I see on a daily basis. And now Head Start is being cut also. So, we have the wrong values in this country, and we need to do something. We need to really have people, everybody in the country needs to march on Washington. The end.
I think one of the things to talk about first, I think one of the little-known secrets of the Washington County Youth Service Bureau Boys and Girls Club is that we are, I like to think of the organization as a little-known gem within the state of Vermont. We actually do two things, and we have a dual mission. And the first mission is to really do the kind of services and the kind of work that Joy's talking about for families and for youth in Washington County. And that runs the gamut from prevention to working individually with youth and families who are in crisis or who are moving through other difficult points in their life. And we also provide direction and leadership for around the state for youth issues through the leadership provided by a number of statewide coalitions. And what I like to point out is that this small little organization that's shares an old building with the Thai restaurant here in Montpelier, actually, when you look at all of the statewide work that we're doing, has direct or indirect contact with roughly one other young person between the ages of 12 and 22 in the state of Vermont. Between the work that we do working with the Runaway and Homeless Youth Coalition, we manage and direct the statewide program for youth who are moving out of foster care into independence, and we place AmeriCorps Vista workers in youth service opportunities around the state. We're meeting and feeling and talking with the people who are on the ground doing the work with the families that that both Joy and Danny are talking about. My reaction to the movie, when I was first approached, the immediate was, what do I have to say working in one of the most homogeneous states, in the country in terms of the racial diversity? What do I know about Latino and Latina youth as it plays out? But watching the movie, my immediate reaction is exactly what Danny's was. These are the same situations that we see in Vermont. These are not urban. Homelessness is not an urban problem. Teen parenting is not an urban problem. These are problems in our communities. These are young people who are moving through these same sort of stories, these same scenarios. But what I walk away from more than anything else whenever I see something that is done about youth with real authenticity is just how incredible that period of life is, and just how absolutely amazing young people are. And I think we often forget that young people, if anything, have more complex problems, more complex lives than we do as adults, because we've moved through, we've found, for the most part, we've become comfortable in our skin. And adolescence is a time of putting on many skins and trying to figure out what is your skin. And it just makes for both a tumultuous and agonizing and wonderfully exciting time. When I do a lot of trainings for youth workers, I say, get ready for it, because you're working with people at the point in their life where they're going through the most drastic change in a time when they're actually able to think about what that change means. And it's incredibly exciting. And it's also terrifying. And it's confusing. And so I think we saw all of that. And I do like the fact that there is hope. There is excitement and exhilaration. I spent the day with, I spent the day with the individuals around the state who are helping youth transition out of foster care into community. At our monthly meeting, and it was just a recognition that these are remarkable young people who are emerging into adulthood, and that alone is hard. Throw in homelessness, throw in parenting, and an interesting and challenging time just gets even more interesting and more challenging. But there's hope.
I wanted to make a comment to you, Danny. We've had one of your students here who worked for a long time with us, and she graduated, and I just got a job reference for her.
Really?
A couple weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and I was just so thrilled that here she was using me as a reference. And it is about showing up. Mm-hmm. And this employer was saying, did she show up on time? Was she diligent in her work? And I could say yes, 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 mm-hmm. and that they were going to hire her. And I'm just so happy that the library could help your program in that way.
Yeah, and that's one of the big, we need the community for this kind of program, because we're asking businesses and organizations like the library to take on our students as employees and or interns. And we work really closely with the Department of Labor. We convinced them that they should be working with our students, because they have a program where they work with out-of-school students. So we convinced them that why not work with our students now while they're in this program? Because it doesn't make sense. What, are you going to wait until they drop out and then work with them? Why don't we work with them now while they're getting their high school diplomas and help them be ready even more so when they graduate? But, you know, that was the hope and everything that you were talking about. I saw that in the film, and I certainly feel it in my work. But there are a lot of gaps, like you were talking about. There's a young woman I'm working with right now. She's pregnant. She's 18. She tried the program last year, and things got too tough, and she left, and she's come back. And she's basically homeless right now. She can't get the help because she doesn't qualify for help in housing. You know, but you know how it, and we're sending her to Nora. Actually, to start.
Nora and I work together because Nora works on the housing part.
Right.
But she is eligible for many services as an 18-year-old.
Yeah, but it's amazing to me that, you know, she's not eligible for some of the housing services through the state because she's not in her third trimester, and she doesn't have a disability that qualifies. So and it just gets so frustrating for people trying to find these services and trying to do the right thing for themselves and being told, you know, we can't help you. And that's pretty dispiriting. But that then is what amazes me, is that, you know, kids are able to overcome that oftentimes, but with help.
Well, they have a lot of resiliency, you know, these, the people who actually overcome many of those hardships show that always. What you were saying about community and community helping these young people, it's also how they experience their community by being involved with the community. They are able to feel more a part of something bigger. And it's so important. And one of the things I do in my program is I bring the young women, and sometimes the dads, but there are often very few of them who are involved, as opposed to Adrian in this film, who was very involved, even though it wasn't a perfect situation. It was way more perfect than anything I usually see. So I bring them into schools, in one particular school, Harwood, where we talk about the realities of being a teen mom. And they feel that they're giving something of themselves to the community. They're helping these 8th grade students at Harwood to understand their stories and their hardships and what it's really like on a day-to-day basis. And they feel so good about themselves, and they always are calling, when are we going back to Harwood, you know, and the teacher there is amazing, who, you know, she always gives my clients flowers, and the kids get toys to play with, and the kids really listen, both the girls and the boys, and especially if there's a dad there, the boys really listen to him. And it's, so it's very, you know, it gives them a lot of confidence to go into schools and offer their stories as a way of helping people in their community. It's huge.
Is there a structure throughout the entire state, or is this just an opportunity in one school?
My program?
Well, you were talking about going to Harwood and that opportunity. Is it throughout the state, or is it single?
I've been taking my clients there for 12 years because they are so respectful, and they have prepared their students so well to our being there that I don't have to worry about anybody being rude to them. And
that's an underlying tone. You guys are in the community doing social justice, social service work, but you have to realize that the youth around them, the schools around them, are very hard on these kids. And where I see an area that is needed is better empathy and understanding from individuals who have the privilege and who have the means to stop looking at these individuals as the other. And I find it within the school systems. Chittenden County is a very wealthy county. We have a lot of issues going on there. That's great, we have a lot of programs, but it's not in my backyard. And I think there needs to be a more global approach in the state, because I battle it all the time, that we got people suffering, and you need to be more empathetic. And it's not survival of the fittest. And it is, to me, a culture and a sensitivity that needs to be brought into the schools, even if the families don't value it from the get-go. And that's where I see a huge, huge problem that needs to be addressed.
Well, that's exactly what I was saying too. That's the reason why I have stopped bringing my clients to certain schools, because people, including teachers, were rude to my clients, and it's not okay. But that's the reality out there. That's what they put up. That's why they don't want to stay in school, because they get teased. They're called sluts. So it's horrible. And even though things have improved in recent years, it hasn't improved. Judgment is rampant in America in general, and when it comes to this population, there's a lot of judgment.
I think there's two underlying issues there as well that extends beyond just the way that pregnant and parenting young people are perceived, and really and speaks to sort of even a broader understanding of youth. I think the first point that I would make is that I think as a state, I think we can be rightfully proud of the leadership that we have taken on developing approaches and system to early child care. We've been consistently and doggedly concerned about that as a state. As we've learned more and more about the fact that during adolescence there is a second developmental process that's going on in the brain that is arguably as important in different ways. As a youth worker, I'd probably say more important, but that's arguably as important as what's happening during early childhood development. We've lagged in really developing consistent and clear statewide policies and approaches to saying youth and what's happening during that moment is really significant and important. The follow-up to that I think speaks to the second piece that you're saying is we've assumed that we don't have to do that because the schools are the place where our youth are. And I think that's a critical mistake. It's a mistake because youth are at a moment in their development where it is even healthier for them to be integrated into community in a larger concept of what defines community. They're defining it, they're seeing it that way, but every time we sort of marginalize services, we marginalize approaches. School or after school activities take place within the walls of the school. And when we do that, we really kind of say this is where youth belong. And suddenly when they're out, on the steps of City Hall, we're complaining about them in a way that we wouldn't complain about an adult who's there. Oddly enough, it was youth who were sitting on the steps of City Hall that led to the Basement Teen Center that's been an institution here in Montpelier for years. So occasionally we see that moment, but generally speaking, we see youth as a product of the school system. We need to begin having a conversation and dialogue about how they belong in community in different ways, in broader ways.
So to that end, and to answer your question a little bit about, do we have those centers and do we have some of those things here? We do have some of those things. Community Connections, who is actually my employer, we have after-school programs in all the schools in central Vermont, and most of the things we do with them, we do outside of the school walls, and we have homework clubs and things like that for students that are struggling. And in this larger cultural context that we're talking about, we have like this is a great forum for people to come and watch and engage in this conversation. And we have a lot of those things happening around central Vermont, but who do we get to come to the table? We need to get the people that need to hear this information to come to the table. And we usually get people who are interested and are concerned and educated and have an investment in education and understand, sort of the layers that are involved. And we need to make things like this and other things that we do for the community friendlier for the people that need to be there, and try to reach those folks and say, hey, this is really good information for you to have, and let's go together. Let's go and see what you can learn from this. It's going to be really helpful. Yeah. Because like Joyce is saying, when I go to people's homes, there's oftentimes education just isn't valued. And sometimes when well, right, and sometimes a student who's actually starting to progress might actually be pulled back down because we don't, you're getting too big for your britches, kind of a thing, and it's really not that important. And then this idea of cultural competencies, where at home or in that community something happens, somebody's car breaks down, and they're going to stay and fix the car. They're not going to go to school or go to work. That's the culture, and it's a tricky game. It's a tricky thing to play, to go into a community and go into somebody's home and be respectful, and also try to point out that this is important too. And one of the things in the film where the kid that was going to Sarah Lawrence or whatever it was, and she said that she puts her brothers first and wants to take care of her brothers. Well, I try to tell kids that have that conversation with me that the best way to take care of your family is to take care of yourself. Put yourself in a position that you can really be helpful. And maybe you're an example to your little brother and your little sister. And maybe you graduate, you get a job, maybe you go to college, and then you can really help. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't.
And one of the other concerns, I've talked to Sheldon about this, is that 16 years of age they can drop out. And some of these individuals really need to be where they are, even if it's not for educational purposes, but until they're 18 years of age. But
sometimes they're just not.
They're not. Yeah.
They're not going to stay. And sometimes school is the best and safest place for them to be. Absolutely. But sometimes it's just not. And to force them to stay, that ultimately I don't think it's going to work. So more opportunities, more choices, different ways to do school. I mean, we have sitting in classrooms and doing the Carnegie units, and you have to be in school this long to earn this credit to graduate. We're starting to blow that up. We're starting to have models that are more big picture school models that are more competency based. So we're starting to do that, but we need to do a lot more of that.
Well, I think, the students who get to be 16 years old and are planning to drop out, and some people think it's okay to do so, it's clear to me that something got missed. There's a huge gap here where that student got lost and is being discarded. And that should absolutely never happen. If there are caring people within the schools and in the community, there has to be some way of getting to that child earlier to make a connection with that person, to make that person feel valuable enough to have hope for the future like these girls have. They all had a mentor. They all had people who were rooting for them. And, when people get ignored in the school system, and I taught in the school system, and they do get ignored, it's a crime. That should never happen. We should not be losing these 16-year-olds to being a dropout.
But the other issue is their parents who pull them out at 16 because they have family businesses and they want them to work. And that happens a lot here. They have jobs that are labor jobs and they need their kids to be the labor. So it isn't a matter for some of them that they don't want to be there. It's a matter that it's what they have to do. And that's another issue that we need to be aware of. And it happens more often than you realize.
I think it's probably fair to say that for most individuals who are in a situation where they're dropping out, there's an element of that decision that appears in the moment, whether it's a family decision or whether it's an individual decision, that appears entirely rational in its own way. And I think looking back at the film tonight, every time one of those young women talked about when they got close to that line, there was a really good reason in their own moment and in their own minds for making the decision, for why the decision to drop out was a perfectly rational decision. And, you know, it's a little hard for us to kind of say that it wasn't a rational decision. I've got a kid I've got to take care of. I've got brothers that, and it's going to be more important for me to just not go to college because I can earn money now and take, you know, that's rational thinking. What we've got to figure out is how do we develop systems, approaches, education styles that allow for humanity to kind of peer through, because these people are ultimately caught living in a moment that's ultimately very human. So how do you create a system that allows someone to honor the fact that they're being put in a position where they have to support a family, their own family? They're being asked to weigh responsibilities that are much greater than someone else, some of their peers, and still get, you know, an education that's going to count
Right.
and mean for something.
So being more flexible.
Yeah.
Right, and that's one of the big buzzwords in education right now is flexible pathways. And so to that end, the state has this program, a flexible pathway program, they're calling it. And it theoretically, students 16 to 21 can use this to graduate from any school that they feel like they want to, regardless of their residence. And it started with Act 176, which came in around 2005, which was, we used it a lot because it gave us resources for CCV classes, for internships, apprenticeships. We could pay people to mentor kids, and it was really good. And we used it, and they didn't like it so much because we spent so much money.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it was really working. But and I hope that this actually works. But another sort of breakdown in the system is that schools don't even know this is happening now.
Yeah.
And that adult basic ed is the partner that schools will need to work with to make this happen. And they don't even know. I had to tell U32 in Montpelier that, you know, this is happening now, and people are going to start coming to you. So, you know, what are you going to do? And I will defend the schools in that I know they're trying to do a lot of things. They really are. I come across nothing but, well, I shouldn't say nothing, but most of the people are really caring, really dedicated, and they want to do the right thing. But I think you're right, Joyce, that people get lost, and that sometimes they get lost early. And when you get lost early, it's really hard to catch up. And I think the structure of the schools is one of the reasons. You know, we put these kids in this building in this sort of Lord of the Flies kind of atmosphere, and you know, sometimes it is survival of the fittest. And a lot of kids aren't fit enough, and they don't have the skills or the tools to negotiate that kind of environment. And teachers get overwhelmed. They're asked to do a lot of stuff, and you know, sometimes it happens. But I think it's a structural thing, and if we could, you know, just get out of our own way to blow up this system and make it really more flexible. You know, why does school have to be from 7 to 3? You know, are we still farmers in the summer and all that? And that's 100-something years old. Why do we still have to do that? But institutions are tough to change.
My ideal is having every kindergartner have an individual educational plan. We start there for all of the kids.
Right. And that's an old idea
Yeah.
that is, you know, starting to make a comeback. But then, you know, we need to implement it, and we need the resources to implement it,
Right.
and we need, you know, teachers to put on new hats and
You have to be able to be very an individual who can not only teach what you know, but to understand how to do it in different ways, and also get what's going on around you. And that's a lot.
It is a lot.
It's a lot, and not everybody can do it. And that's why what's wonderful, team teaching. And, you know, because with team teaching, you've got one that maybe is more personable and one that's more mechanical, and you work those dichotomies out, which makes the classroom more user-friendly. It just would be better if we had that type of dual system. But, you know, we're getting there. I mean, we're getting there.
Can I ask, and if anyone else, I don't mean to dominate, can I ask from each one of your professional opinions, from watching the film, from your professional experience, is there one or two calls to action that this film brings to mind to you?
Well, I see it more globally in a way. I would like to see more money paid towards education in this country and less going for the military, for example. And I think, you know, we have the means and the people in this country to change things. And hopefully, you know, I mean, I may be a dreamer, but I really feel like we need to put our resources into education and more than survival, you know, feeding people. And there should be no hungry kids and adults in Vermont, and there are. And I'm a member of the Hunger Council, and we talk about this constantly, and we're working on these issues. But, you know, why we have to spend so much money on things that kill people and not enough on the humanistic kinds of issues that face our country. So I see it in those terms.
I agree with that 100%. And if I had to pick one thing, the school where the kids were going through the metal detectors and any of the images where they were in a school with the hallways and the locker rooms, it seems counterintuitive to put, you know, vibrant, young, active, young people in that kind of setting. I mean, just physiologically, if you go through a metal detector to go to school, your brain is at some level, you know, the autonomic nervous system is kicking in, and you're doing a little bit of fight or flight syndrome right there. It's got to happen, and so that's not very conducive. So, you know, I just think we really got to think big and think about blowing this thing up. Maybe not literally, but, you know, actually be flexible. Let's have things happen elsewhere. Let's have things happen at different times. Let's listen to kids and see what they really want to do and try to give them the opportunities to do that, you know, out in the world.
Can I make just one comment today? That was Chicago, and I've worked with Chicago Public Schools, and believe it or not, that created a situation where you had the school being a safe haven. Mm-hmm. A lot of the schools were on the State Street corridor, as an example, or by Cabrini Green, some of the infamous tenement homes, and kids were getting killed walking from the tenement home across the courtyard into the school. Mm-hmm. They actually implemented what they called walking school buses. The superintendent, the religious community, the police came and walked into the tenement homes and walked the kids to school. Truancy went from 60% back up to 90%. I'm saying inverse, that attendance went from 60% to 90%. So things like that can work, and you actually had programs where it's great to get the kids out of the school, but in some of these schools where you have gangs that are running the communities, they were the safe havens. They were the homes of the midnight basketball. Yeah. They were the after-school programs.
That struck me that the principal of that school said, we're trying to keep kids in school. And I understand that completely. And there's a place, I think, for getting kids out of school that is also going to be beneficial. Yeah.
I think that we talk a lot about whether or not the problem is there enough affordable housing units in Vermont. We talk a lot about is there enough public transportation to get youth and families to services, and the unfortunate reality is all that is true. And I've been doing this for a little more than 15 years now, working with the Youth Service Bureau. And I would say 15 years ago we were asking the same questions, mm-hmm. and I don't think I've seen anyone come up with really good vibe. There have been a couple of pockets around the state. Brattleboro's got a really neat youth housing initiative that they're working on right now. But it takes a lot more work and resources than are typically available. So, I think there is some global pieces, but, I also, and maybe maybe I got waterlogged today on the way here, but, I still want to ride that hopeful vein, and I think my answer to your question will be one that's more individualized and local, and that is about 8 or 9 years ago, we started working with the Runaway Coalition to look at how we could begin to measure resiliency factors for even youth who are in the toughest situations. Youth who were homeless and run away, who were cast out, who living in really deplorable conditions, who were struggling with all these pieces, with the belief that the research, the one silver bullet that probably exists within youth work is the resiliency data that kind of started out of the Search Institute and then has grown and developed in many other places, that basically says the more good things you can identify about yourself, personal strengths, resiliency markers, the greater your chance of avoiding risky behaviors. The fewer good risk, the fewer assets or resiliency markers you have, the greater your chance you're going to be involved in risk. And it's almost an inverse relationship. So we started experimenting with, okay, what can we do to start measuring whether or not we and the services that we're providing for youth make a difference? And over the time, we've really come to recognize that of all of the assets that people talk about, the one that research is saying is most significant, and I think we can all think back to someone in our lives who would validate this, is if I have someone who isn't being paid to care for me, but still does in some significant and real ways. And it doesn't mean, they're paying for my college. It doesn't mean they're, it sometimes means they're going and willing to play racquetball with me on Tuesdays. That relationship alone is significant to bend incredible curves. And so one call to action that I think everyone can do is understand the youth in your community and know one of them and know them well. And that's a call to action that can make a difference. So.
Could you tell us how kids get to you and to your program?
All kinds of ways for me, obviously through the schools. U32 has a pretty, through their TA system and their, when they meet about kids that are struggling, a lot of them come through that at U32. And then I get calls from grandmothers, from parents, from a friend of a friend. Hey, I heard about you from somebody on the street, and because I'm out and about more than I am in an office. So all kinds of ways, through Department of Labor, through probation, a lot of different sources.
And the same with the teen parent program, and this brochure is in a lot of doctors' offices, hospitals, schools, other agencies. So we get referrals from, including word of mouth from friends of my clients who also are in the same situation, but schools and doctors' offices and other agencies throughout Washington County.
And Craig, you have so many programs under your umbrella.
Sure. And the referrals coming out, and the most important thing I'd say is that the Washington County Youth Service Bureau runs a 24-hour, 365-day-a-week crisis line that youth and families in crisis can just immediately, during office hours and after hours, be in touch fairly quickly with one of our staff members who can begin the process of assistance. So referrals come in through that, referrals come in through schools, referrals come in through families, through youth. And the other thing that I think, working in an umbrella organization, it's not uncommon for a young person to come through the door of our prevention programs and be involved with one of the teen centers or one of the after-school programs. And then as they're working with staff in that capacity, it becomes a safe place for them to start talking about, my family doesn't have a lot of money for food, or I had a big fight with my mom last night, and I'm thinking about leaving. So a lot of it actually kind of comes by listening to the young people themselves.
And I also want to say that I have clients who are in the counseling program at the Youth Service Bureau, the housing program at the Youth Service Bureau. And so we are also a team of people working together with a single individual. And that just makes it more, you know, a stronger bureau and a stronger client.
Any final comments from each of you?
It was great. Thanks for having me.
Really interesting film. I appreciate having a chance to see it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very
Thank
much.
you so much for coming. And it'll be on VPT. Independent Lens is the